that is K-State and LSU. And look, I think for a lot of reasons, LSU has lost the quarterback now in the transfer portal. They're trying to petition their way into allowing a scholarship kid to play without it burning his red shirt because he's already played 4 games. If not that, it'll be a walk-on at quarterback. So like LSU, a program in transition, who knows what to expect out of them. But what can you tell us from what you see out of K-State and LSU on paper right now?
Well, during my time previewing K-State for SicEm365, our site, and what I do weekly is I preview who we play. So I've seen each of these Big 12 teams up close and personal, both from a stats standpoint, from an X and O standpoint, from a roster standpoint. K-State has a roster that if there is one player on one team in the entire Big 12 that means more to his team than just about anybody, it's Skylar Thompson at Kansas State. So between him being able to play or not, and that LSU quarterback getting a waiver or not, you could have wildly different results for the two offenses here. But with Skylar Thompson, Kansas State is averaging 40 yards a drive against Power 5 teams, having a massive field position advantage and doing outstanding. Without him, they're below 25 yards a drive. It's just staggeringly different. Now, don't get me wrong, you went up against a really athletic Texas defense that, while they haven't been at their best, they do present some athletic matchups up front. And you also went against the Oklahoma State defense, which is not exactly the easiest to go against.
Yeah.
You know. And then you're going against an LSU team that offensively is getting less than opponents typically give up, but their defense is doing similar. So you're up against a pretty good defense. You're going to need Skylar in order to have a big day against them if you're going to have a big day. But the K-State defense is right there with them statistically. You know, the scheme change to go to more of the Iowa State style 3-3-5, as opposed to the 4-down front that you guys had run basically since 2009 under 2 different coaching staffs. It shored up a lot of the weaknesses you guys had against RPOs and other spread tactics that had really kind of come in vogue in the Big 12. And you saw a massive step forward. And I think that can be to your benefit here in this matchup, because I saw that Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Arkansas all had pretty decent results against LSU running a very similar scheme. But on paper, what really jumps out to me is in the lead up to what I was breaking down for our site, I haven't updated this number, but before that game, K-State was like 5th nationally looking at Power 5 games in terms of plays going for 50 plus yards in terms of as a percentage. K-State doesn't run a lot of plays, but they are very explosive with the plays they have. I mean, they get around 7-ish% of their plays going for 20 yards. And that also matches almost identically what LSU's given up to Power 5 teams. So that's a very alarming statistic for Tiger fans. And then on the other side, LSU really hasn't been that explosive. And K-State's done a good job bottling up those plays. But what really jumped out to me is, other than a really dominant performance on the ground against Florida, LSU hadn't run the ball consistently, even against the likes of Louisiana Monroe. It's really been hit or miss for them. They'll usually hit 1 or 2 big ones, but apart from that, it's really not a whole lot, and they're not protecting the passer all that well. So against the K-State defense that's been able to get a lot of pressure, even with that 3-down look, and limit the running game pretty well, at least on paper, it points as, assuming that there's not some bad adjustment to just the talent on hand, and that's not a shock to the system. You'd think that the numbers on paper would lead you to think that K-State would have the edge here.
I like hearing that. Winding things down, couple bowl games left. They are 2 games in which the Big 12 team is a fairly decisive underdog. Minnesota and West Virginia in the Guarantee Rate Bowl, in the Liberty Bowl, Texas Tech and Mississippi State. What's your read on those 2 to finish things off here?
Well, the Liberty Bowl, Tech, by virtue of their upset of Iowa State, got into the Liberty Bowl. And this is a game that Mike Leach has got circled on his calendar. They still haven't paid him for 2009, and he'll tell anybody that'll listen. But yeah, you got 2 air raids going against each other. Both are doing a lot of the 3-down drop 8 defense. Mississippi State's been a lot more efficient at it this year, and Tech's defense has definitely been a work in progress, but Tech's defense has been playing better down the stretch than they had been. I still give the edge to Mississippi State because I think Tech's starting a freshman quarterback, making his fourth start, and he had a rough one against Oklahoma State, and he had a decent outing in Waco, and he had a really good outing, his first one against Iowa State. I gotta lean Mississippi State there just between the better defensive efficiency numbers and just the difference in having a veteran quarterback as opposed to somebody making his fourth start. But I wouldn't say it's hopeless for Tech, because you got a situation where the defense of Mississippi State's run is very similar to what Iowa State ran, and the kids showed a lot of success with what that scheme asked the opposing quarterback to do. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of film study on both sides, but this game's going to come down to beyond just the quarterback, but the interim staff for Tech, how invested are they as opposed to their new jobs? And it's definitely in flux. It could be a really big day for Mike Leach. Obviously hoping that Tech can show up and have a pretty respectable showing here, but they've got a tough draw. And then the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, Minnesota statistically is showing up a lot stronger than I was expecting going in. They're winning field position by a big degree. Their offense is outperforming opposing defenses by a big degree. Their defense is doing really well to a similar degree. West Virginia's offense is a little beneath what opposing defenses otherwise give up. Their defense is strong, but the field position loss kind of puts them up against the wall a lot. So that's something they're dealing with. It's going to be a tough matchup for them. But one area where I think it might tilt in West Virginia's favor, if it's going to tilt, is just as I mentioned, the K-State was really good at generating 20-plus plays. Minnesota is decidedly not, which means that West Virginia and all the different stunts and twists and light blitzes that they do with those quick D linemen they can disrupt. They'll have plenty of chances to disrupt them up front and get them off the field that way. And then in the red zone, West Virginia has had outstanding defense in the red zone. And if they can win in the red zone, like they did against Iowa State, KU, and Virginia Tech, that could tilt this one. It's one where the numbers immediately point to Minnesota probably having the edge, but there's a couple areas where I could potentially see West Virginia be able to tilt this thing in their favor.
Well, Sam, I really appreciate you taking some time for me. I appreciate all the breakdown, not only just the work that you do here, the work you did with the TV numbers, all the way back to everything happening at the beginning of Big 12 apocalypse. It's been fun following along. So take care, enjoy bowl season, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me on.